Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is April the 27th, Sunday, 3:33 Brasilia time, and we are getting started with our live stream. I'm gonna ask you if you are able to see our image, if you are able to hear our live stream. We are on the go and therefore not exactly sure if everything is working as it should. But if you are around, please chime in the chat window so we know what's going on. Thank you very much. Trying to see. All right, we have a Bill. Bill is in the house. Bill, oi Luciano, looking good. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. Very tricky. I see a message here on YouTube Studio. An error occurred. Please try again later. But as long as you can see me and you can hear me, we are all set. And unfortunately, today we are unable to share a second screen over here. But I can tell you that nowadays most of the news are about the Pope, about the death of Pope Francisco, and all the outcome. You know, the visits from the world leaders. President Lula attended the funeral of Pope Francisco. So that's what we have mostly in the news today. Okay. We have also Wayne. Sound is okay, video is okay. Thank you, Wayne. Serge, yes, I hear you and see you well. Thank you, Serge. Ronnie, bom dia. Good to see you guys over here. So glad to have you back. All right. So while you're still warming up, let's see if we have any suggestions for topics. We actually have Aaron. Welcome back, Aaron. Aaron says, hi, Luciana. I hope you are well. I wanted to ask, can the digital nomad visa now lead to permanent residency and citizenship? Aaron, no, it does not lead to pretty much anything. And there is an exchange here from the Brazilian government's perspective, and the idea is they make it easy for you to secure the digital nomad, but on the other hand, it does not lead to anything. So the digital nomad is meant to be as a bridge, but whatever time you are spending on the digital nomad is not going to accrue. Is not going to accrue to anything. This said, just by being in Brazil, just by staying in Brazil, this could be an opportunity for other doors to open. And I can give you an example. Brazil in general is a pretty international country in a sense that, particularly if you are in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Brasilia, Florianopolis, like you're gonna be in a very type of international environment. So you could receive, for instance, an invitation to work for a company with international operations, and if that happens, you could be hired by this company, and then traditionally the first 2 years when you hired under a work visa, the first 2 years they are going to be like a temporary residency, and after 2 years when you renew, the work visa is going to come as a permanent residency. Okay, so that's just an example. Other clients we have here at the firm, they say, well, listen, I spent already a couple of years here in Brazil. I do love the country. I want to stay for longer, and therefore I am making funds available in my home country to buy real estate property in Brazil, and through the real estate investment to qualify for first the 4-year temporary residency, and after that the permanent residency. All right, Aaron. So it does not lead to something by itself, but in our experience, is still important for our clients to kind of find different paths for a more permanent timeline in Brazil, if you will. Bill looks sharp and clear. Thank you, Bill. Thank you again for sharing. B. Smith, I'm presuming that the US company I own can pay for rent for my office in Brazil, right? If so, can they pay for my office, which is in my home, without Brazilian tax obligations? B. Smith, your US company can certainly pay for whatever expenses you have, right? So you would pretty much, when you are like in the US, right, or your US company would pay like obligations in Brazil, as long as the landlord is willing to accept direct transfers from abroad, which is not always the case. But if you're gonna rent a place, you could have that as a condition. Say, listen, I'm gonna rent your place, I'm gonna pay the asked price, as long as you are able to receive a payment from abroad, right? So I think that's something you would need to negotiate upfront. Okay, now in terms of Brazilian tax obligations, I am unable to answer this question, B. Smith. It's just too complex. Like, there are 10 other variables that we will need to discuss, and I don't want to get entangled in taxation issues down the line, right? So, if it is something straightforward, I don't mind asking, but when we have like a scenario that has too many components, I would rather not, give like information that could be misleading. All right, B. Smith, I hope you understand. Jelmer, hi Luciano, thank you for this live stream, very insightful. Thank you, Jelmer. Thank you for the encouraging words. Thank you for showing up. As I like to say, this live stream is not going to be the same without you guys. So if you show up, you participate with opinions, with questions, with your participation is certainly makes more sense for us to continue with those live streams. Aaron, thank you. I heard from other attorneys that the nomad visa can lead to permanent residency after 4 years. Wasn't sure if that was true. Not sure about what other people are saying, Aaron, but I know from the framework that the digital nomad doesn't lead to anything. Traditionally, every single residency route in Brazil is going to have a matching regulation, and the regulation itself is going to address when that particular route can be expanded to something else. So if you take a look at the regulation addressing the retirement track, for instance, it says that after the first 2 years as a temporary residency in Brazil, it can be renewed. It can be renewed as permanent residency, but that information is in the regulation itself, right? So for the digital nomad, there is no such a language, and actually the only language is that the digital nomad could be renewed for once, right? So if anything, it doesn't lead even to a second renewal, right? Like, you don't have like multiple renewals. It's just something for 1 year and maybe 2 years. That's the regulation. That's how the law addresses the digital nomad. Now, interesting to note that even though the law says once, we have some clients renewing for twice, right? But that doesn't mean that just because they're not following the 1 year original language, that they are going to make this thing become something, permanent. Okay, I think that's a stretch. And the digital nomad was actually created in the second semester towards the end of 2022. So there is not even like 4 years, right, for anyone to assess if that route of making it a permanent residency is going to happen or not, right? So no language, no provision from any type of regulation, and no positive experience to that effect, Aaron. Okay, the Drunk Dragon, welcome back, Drunk Dragon. The guy at the Federal Police in Rio Airport said, I can pay the fine for overstaying only when I leave the country. Yeah, that's very common, the Drunk Dragon. Like I had a consultation. It was on Friday. It was with a lady. She was in Rio de Janeiro, just overstaying, right? Like, I mean, she just like, came to Brazil and was overstaying for a couple of months. So we addressed the fine that she would have to pay. And then she wanted to come back on track with her legal status, right? So I called Patrick. Patrick, he's our manager of the Rio de Janeiro office, and then I said, listen, Patrick, how is the office currently accepting requests for paying the fine? Because I know sometimes they decline people. They say, go away, and I'm too busy here. When you leave, you pay. This type of stuff. And his recommended strategy is to say, listen, I'm going to apply for the digital nomad residency, and I'm not going to be able to be approved. I'm not going to be able to be approved unless I am, I am straight with the Brazilian immigration. Therefore, I need to pay the fine now. Okay, so different people, Drunk Dragon, different officers at the Police Federal, they can give you different answers. Very common. Whenever they are busy, they tell you to go home. All right, that's very, very common. There is no single approach. There is no single outcome. So when I was telling the lady about the strategy to go over there, I was very specific. All right, and that's gonna be on a try basis, right? Like, I mean, nobody's going to guarantee that you're going to show up there and they are going to, that they are going to, issue the fine and allow you to pay the fine. And if I had to guess why they are behaving like this, is because according to Brazilian law, once you pay the fine, you get an additional couple of months to stay in Brazil legally, right? Which is kind of a very curious, very interesting. Like, particularly if you think about U.S. Immigration, right? Like, I mean, what do you mean? Like, you overstay, you pay the fine, and now you get as a gift 2 months to stay in Brazil, right? So I think the Polícia Federal, they're saying, what? If we keep allowing people to pay the fine and get an additional couple of months, guess what people are going to do? In theory, you could stay for, the 6 months, right? Like, you stay for 3, you extend your stay for an additional 3, and then you maybe overstay a single day or 2 days or 3 days because you don't want to pay a lot of fines, right? And then you just go there, well, I overstay 5 days, give me the fine. And then you pay, you pay a dime and you get an additional couple of months. Obviously, they don't want that to occur. So in my head, like, they're pushing back. They say, what, go home. I'm not going to give you, 2 months extra just because you paid, I don't know, 500 reais, right? And remember, immigration officers, they have this discretion, right? So if they think that's the whole, that's the whole dynamic of your request, to pay the fine, I think it does make sense for them to tell you, you know what, I'm not going to fine you. Go home when you leave the country. When you have a ticket, show me that you're going to leave next week. Yes, maybe I'm going to, give you an opportunity to pay the fine, right? If that makes sense, okay? But, like the strategy from our office, again, not guaranteed, but what we've been doing, what we've been recommending for our clients is like, go over there, tell them you want to get back on track, on legal status in Brazil, And unless you pay this fine, they are not going to be able to apply for the digital nomad, for instance, right? And that's been the strategy, okay? Sometimes we're going to go with the foreign citizen, like particularly if you are in Rio de Janeiro, right? Like, I mean, our office is 5 minutes from, the federal police in Rio de Janeiro. So usually someone from the office is going to go with the person over there, right? But paying clients, right? Not like clients who are just using our strategies without paying us anything. But if you are a client, then yes, someone from the office would actually go with you to the Polícia Federal, and that may be, like the nudge, the missing nudge for the Polícia Federal to say, what, like, all right, like, here's your fine, pay your fine, and then you get 2 months, and during those 2 months, like, you have a new window of opportunity, to file for, it could be the digital nomad, it could be the retirement route, it could be, a bunch of things. All right, Drunky Dragon, I hope that makes sense. Aaron is asking, with the Golden Visa, if I wanted to spend the 500,000 reais for the business route, could this be an Airbnb? Aaron, so, some countries such as the United States, like Portugal, they are becoming pickier and pickier in terms of the business that you're going to propose to secure something more long term in terms of immigration. Brazil has not been the case so far, right? Like, I mean, so far, because there is no guarantee. Like, I mean, we have changes going on in the Brazilian framework, right? Like, I mean, just to mention one, right? The e-visa for U.S. citizens, Canadians, and Australians, which finally took off on the fourth try, right? Like, and they tried for 3 times, they couldn't make it. On the fourth, it did work, and now you cannot enter Brazil without an e-visa. So there are things changing all the time. And what I'm gonna tell you is not like from today to the future, it's like based on the past, right? So I'm gonna tell you, Aaron, that at least as of today, there would be no bar for you to set up a business based on Airbnb rental, okay? We have another client here at the firm who applied for the, for the investment route based on a pousada, right? But as you probably know, like, we don't actually advertise this route here at the firm, just because we don't think, the business environment in Brazil is suitable, particularly to foreign citizens coming from first, developed countries, first world developed countries. I'm not sure if this language is still politically correct, but you get the idea. Like, you coming from a country in which, is, business, to conduct business, to open a business, to run a business is so easy, and then you come to Brazil full of, red tape and bureaucracy, and we just don't want to get entangled in that attempt, because, down the line, you're probably going to face, like, labor lawsuits. You're going to face, issues with taxation, right? And we don't want to be, the person who said, yes, I'm going to help you, get to that, track. So we skip altogether, unless when the person comes to us, like, they are already in business. Say, listen, I'm running business in Brazil for 5 years. I've been as a temporary resident in Brazil. Now it's time to become a permanent residency, and I have a couple of business. I've been making money in Brazil. So this person is not like someone who's just gonna pick a business route just for the sake of immigration. No, this is a business person who's experienced, who has already endured, Brazil's challenges when it comes to business. So it's an exception, okay? It's an exception here at the firm. But Aaron, so, a short answer is yes, at least as of today, based on the information we have, no concerns in terms of Airbnb. And there are other foreign citizens structuring something like this. They want to, invest in real estate. They don't want to invest in 1 million reais. They either don't have 1 million reais, or they don't want to commit the amount of money, and then they try to, convert that into a real estate type of business, right? Just remember, you're going to need to provide a business plan, and there is a need for this business to generate employment, right? So you are going to be on the hook for creating job positions. You cannot be, create job for myself, right? You gotta be create jobs for Brazilians, right? For Brazilians, not foreign citizens, for Brazilians, right? So just keep that in mind. All right, Aaron. Marisa Navas, olá, Dr. Luciano, estamos amando sua live. Muito obrigado, Marisa. Thank you so much, Marisa and Ricardo, directly from Lisbon. So good to see you guys over here. Thank you for your support. Thank you for everything you do. Churin Mitchell. Hello, Churin. Welcome back. Good afternoon. I will retire March 2026. I want to apply for the retirement visa. When would you suggest I make an appointment with your firm? Churin, so, a question we have very often here at the firm is like, do I need to be retired? Can I be working? What is the minimum retirement age in Brazil? And you probably know this answer, but I'm just going to repeat for other people who are listening to us right now. Brazil doesn't care about your age. Brazil doesn't care if you are working or not. The only thing that Brazil cares, or the main thing that Brazil cares, is whether you have traditional retirement income. That's the number one, all right? So if you have a qualifying traditional retirement income, Brazil doesn't care if you're still working. Brazil doesn't care if you are 20 years of age, right? You are gonna be fine. Of course, there are other requirements, such as, a clean background check, but talking about the retirement component, it's all about qualifying retirement income, okay? So in your case, Sharon, you're saying that you're going to retire in March of 2026. And we do need to show, we like to show traditionally 3 months worth of, bank statements and statements of your qualifying retirement income, right? So in theory, if you want to, have a good, if you want to have like a solid application, I would recommend you to probably wait for at least a couple of months, okay? For at least a couple of months, so you show that you are receiving this income on a repetitive basis. It's not just like the first month, right? So maybe, Charing, like March of 2026, that's when you could start working with us, because then we're going to be working on other documents, on assembling your board, onboarding you into the firm, like a bunch of things. So maybe starting March of 2026, and then potentially applying between April and May of 2026. Okay, depending on the planning, we could even help you apply through a Brazilian consulate. Sometimes they are a little bit more flexible in terms of how many months worth of bank statement you should have. But, to avoid this type of situation in which they say, well, you just have one, I don't know if this is going to continue or not, we would suggest starting on in March 2026 to apply probably during the month of May of 2026, if that makes sense, Charing, okay? Another approach, Charing, and I think I already shared this strategy, we have many people who are no longer working, they are just waiting for something to trigger the retirement, or they are still working, but they are not working in person. So you could potentially come to Brazil under the digital nomad, and then from Brazil you would migrate from the digital nomad to the retirement track, right? That's also very common here at the firm. People say, well, I want to do the retirement. We look into their specifics. They don't qualify yet. They're going to qualify in 1 or 2 years. They don't want to wait, right? Like, I mean, they are capable of coming to Brazil at that moment in time, and therefore we say, listen, let's structure a digital nomad. You come right away, and whenever you qualify, then you basically just migrate from the digital nomad to the retirement, because the retirement is the good thing, right? The retirement, you usually get like a couple of years. Actually, if you apply in the US or another country outside of Brazil, you get 2 years. In Brazil, you would get a first year, and then you get a second year, and then these are going to be the two kind of years for the temporary residency. After 2 years, you're going to apply for the permanent residency. So that wasn't initially the concept for the retirement visa / residency. Nowadays it is. That's what I was talking about, changes in the immigration framework. So nowadays the retirement track is such a big deal, because again, like, you don't need to buy real estate, you don't need to invest in a company. You pretty much just say, listen, I have a qualifying income, and here I am a good folk, no concerning background checks, and you're good. All right, so there you go. All right, Christopher EM. Hi, Christopher. Christopher says, boa tarde, senhor Luciano. Boa tarde, Christopher. CPF is requested for many transactions, thus using Pix from my NRA account, where CPF is automatically attached to the digital transaction, imply a tax reporting obligation. Christopher, that's a pretty interesting question. I think you guys can tell I don't like much like tax questions, just because usually they have like a bunch of caveats, right? Like, meaning that if I tell you something, there is probably some nuance in the scenario that could change my answer. But traditionally, right, typically, okay, not always, typically, just because you made a payment using Pix, which is associated with your Brazilian tax ID known as a CPF, that does not automatically create an obligation on tax reporting. All right, so let's think about a scenario, right? You are in Brazil under the digital nomad. You're being very careful not to exceed the 183 days, meaning you are no more than 180 days in Brazil, okay? You have zero income in Brazil. You don't have an Airbnb. You're not being paid for anything. You have zero income. And you just, using the Pix system to make payments, which you correct. They are pinging your tax ID, okay? Most probably than not, you're not gonna have any reporting obligation. All right, Christopher, that's the qualifying answer. But again, most of the time, maybe there is something you're not thinking about, I'm not thinking about, but traditionally, your tax reporting obligation is gonna occur when you are either a permanent resident. If you are a permanent resident, then there is no 183 days. You are a tax resident from the moment. If you exceed 183 days in any given 365 days, I'm not talking about calendar days, I'm talking about a moving bracket trying to catch you, okay? You are a tax resident. If you have income in the country, but you don't exceed the 183 and you're not a permanent resident, then you have obligation to report only the income that you make in the country, right? So we have many clients, like, they have no desire to live in Brazil whatsoever, but they have a property in Brazil. They say, listen, I just want to come to Brazil once or twice a year. They like to brag, to their friends. I have a property, I have a beachfront apartment in Rio de Janeiro. They have no desire to live in Brazil. They just want to come for vacation, right? And those folks, if they do short-term rental, their tax reporting obligation is going to be specifically for the income that they are generating in the short-term rental business, all right? Like they don't need to report their global income because they are not tax residents. All right, Ken Hillard, welcome Ken. My Social Security benefits letter was apostilled by Washington, D.C., not the State Department. Is this acceptable for a retirement visa? Ken, I don't think there's going to be any issues because if you think it is true, Social Security comes from who? Like, the federal government, right? And an apostille on a federal government document, it should actually be issued by Washington, D.C. So I don't see any reason for you to have a problem. Right now, between my interpretation and whoever is going to evaluate your application, there may be a distance, but I will tell you that your approach is actually the correct one because, again, Social Security Administration is not from the state, it's from the federal government, and a document from the federal government should be apostilled by Washington, D.C., and not by a state authority, if you will. Therefore, my guess is that you're going to be just fine. Drunk Dragon, thank you for your answers. You're pretty welcome, Drunk. Welcome for coming over and supporting our live stream. Ronnie, do you know what the new conditions are for a U.S. citizen to get the e-visa? Exactly, do we need to show income, where I am staying, or a plane ticket in advance or of receiving? Yes, Ronnie, and you kind of touched the main ones, right? So they want to see that you have at least a couple of $1,000s to travel to Brazil. They are not really that crazy about how much money you're making. If it is $1,500 a month or if it is $15,000 a month, they are not really crazy about that. Rule of thumb: $2,000 a month. That's the income that they like, and that's how much money they want to see in your bank account. They want to say, you know what? This person is asking for an e-visa. They have $2,000. They can come to Rio de Janeiro and probably spend a couple of weeks in Rio de Janeiro, have a good time, and come back to the United States, right? So we spoke about the income. Second requirement, Ronnie, would be where you're staying, right? So you need to show that you have secured some type of a place for you to stay at. That's correct. And planned ticket, yes, they also ask you, and by the way, they ask you for a round trip. Okay, these are in the requirements. Maybe next Sunday, I'm gonna have the second screen, and I would be able to share with you guys, like we can take a look at the e-visa together, and I can break down each of those requirements, but I do recall those from the top of my head. So yes, round trip tickets, right? Not only the one-way thing, like you need both ways. They want to make sure that you're coming back, okay? And they also want to see the 2,000 that you're coming back and you have a place to stay. All right, that's for tourism, right? Like if you're gonna attend a conference, if you're gonna attend a convention, if you're gonna attend the business meetings, it does change dramatically. Typically in the past, like you could just come to Brazil as a US citizen, Canadian/Australian, with 0 visas, right? You just buy your ticket, come to Brazil, go do a bunch of meetings, go to a convention. Not anymore. A visa is pretty straightforward for those who are coming for tourism, not exactly for business trips, all right? They are gonna ask a bunch of weird stuff. They want letters from your company, from the receiving company. They wanna understand the meetings that you're gonna have. I think they went overboard, okay? Maybe the supervisor, or the immigration authority delegated this to an intern. I'm joking, of course, it's not the case, but it doesn't make much sense, the distinctions between the requirements for the tourism side of the e-visa and the business side of the e-visa. I think we should make it very easy for people to do business in Brazil, right? Not difficult, but, go figure. Okay, Marco, does showing your 401k or investment account achieve the goal of proving your financial ability? Many people don't have a formal pension these days. Marco, that's an interesting question. We had a client who was this client was securing our services after being denied the retirement visa at a Brazilian consulate, right? And the Brazilian consulate said, listen, I see you have here a large 401k. I understand the 401ks in the United States, they do have, like this kind of, it's kind of a traditional type of, retirement type of income, just like the Roth IRA, the traditional IRA, right? Maybe just like annuities, like they're not really Social Security, they're not pension, they are not disability, but they're still very classic and traditional, if you will, for US citizens. I totally agree. But their explanation is that they would not accept because they couldn't see a drawing, right? So they just saw a bunch of money in an account, but the candidate was not drawing, right? So it is something that it does show that you have reserves, but it doesn't show the kind of consistent stream of income that the Brazilian authorities are trying to assess. Okay, so from this perspective, I would say, Marco, that if you have like 3 months of drawing from your 401k, and maybe you say, well, I don't want to draw, and if that's the case, you are out of luck. But if it's time for you to draw, and if you're drawing over $2,000 a month, and if you're doing that for over 3 months, I would say you have a very good shot at being accepted at the consulate, and even better if you are applying directly in Brazil, because the immigration in Brazil, they usually like to see the income stream. If there is an income stream and this is coming from something that is something like a 401k, we did have a case like that he went just fine in Brazil, right? We didn't have a case like that in the US yet, but we did have a case like this in Brazil. So I would say that in Brazil, chances are even better. All right, Marco. Aaron, with the digital nomad visa, if you have the 18,000 US dollars, does it need to be in a checking account, or can it be in the stock market? Does it need to be transferred to reals at all? So first one, it cannot be in a stock market, in funds, in Vanguard, 401k. The 18,000 US dollars for the purpose of the digital nomad, it must be in a checking account, right? It could be in a savings account, but they want to see something liquid, something that you can use as you need. And if you have something, the stock exchange, right? Like maybe tomorrow you don't have the 18,000, you have 9,000, right? God forbid. I wish you to have not the 18, but maybe 36. But that's the concern, right? Like, I mean, you never know what this thing is going to be tomorrow. It's not liquid. And maybe if you incur a loss, even if you have 500,000 US dollars in your stock account, maybe you don't want to draw, right? So that's not something that the immigration want to see. So that's the first answer. No, it does not qualify traditionally, right? You never know the decision from the officer, but that's pretty solid in our experience. Second part of the answer, it does not need to be in reals, right? Like you just leave this money in your U.S. bank account. You don't need to transfer to Brazil. And maybe the reason for this question, Aaron, maybe it's because you're thinking about Portugal. Portugal, traditionally, they don't want to, have money in someone else's bank, right, or another country's bank. They want to have this money in Portugal. So that's why they say, you know what, if you're going to have the qualified reserves, these reserves need to be in Portugal, not in the US. Brazil is different. Brazil doesn't care. So you can keep it the 18,000 in the US, no problem at all. All right, Christopher, obrigado pela resposta. You're pretty welcome, Christopher. The general answer you gave is exactly what I was looking for. I know the specific cases can bring you nuances. Thank you. Absolutely, Christopher. Thank you for your understanding. Greg B, welcome, Greg. Good to see you back. Thank you for doing this service. You're welcome. Do you know how money from a Roth IRA is treated for tax purposes? In the US, is income tax free? Right. So there are two aspects, Greg. Like there is the drawing and there is like the appreciation. Okay. And typically Brazil is not going to be concerned when you're drawing, right? Brazil is going to be concerned about the appreciation, okay? And if I'm not mistaken, the current taxation bracket for this type of financial investment, right? That's just like from the top of my head, not guaranteed, but I think it's going to be 15%, okay? And traditionally, Brazil does not care if the U.S. is charging taxes or not. Like Brazil is not bound by any rules from the United States naturally, right? So if you're making money, guess what? Brazil is going to say, yes, you need to pay me taxes. Don't tell me that you don't pay in your country. And actually, if you don't pay in your country, one more reason for you to pay in Brazil, right? Because then you're not paying over there, pay to Brazil. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but this is a consistent approach in international taxation, right? Like what one country is not taxing has no connection to what the second country is going to do. Okay, so I can tell you very confidently that whatever you're not paying in the United States, Brazil is not going to really care. Or if they care, it's going to be to find one more reason for you to pay to Brazil, not for you not to pay. I hope that makes sense, Greg. Bill, hit that thumbs up. 21 people watching, only 9 likes. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for keeping an eye. Yes, I would appreciate if you guys could just go and hit that like button. It does help our business and it does help other people just like you find this content. I appreciate Bill and I appreciate each of you who are gonna click on the like button. I appreciate Bill. Moses, good afternoon, sir. It has been a while, Moses. Good to see you. I entered late as a foreigner with permanent residency. I have a property and I use it for Airbnb. Every month I earn only 14,000. What percentage of tax and am I obliged to pay? Moses, I don't know. I cannot tell you, right? Usually the bracket is going to depend on two things, right? The first thing, if you are a tax resident, okay? If you are not a tax resident, let's say you bought the property and you went outside, you just bought the property, you got the real estate investor visa, because the first 4 years, they are not permanent. Remember that, Moses. You buy the property, you apply for the real estate investor visa. First, you're gonna get 4 years of temporary residency. And as long as you're not living permanently in Brazil, let's say if you're just living 3 months or 6 months a year in Brazil, you're not a tax resident. The tax bracket would most probably be 15%, okay? I hope that makes sense. Now, once you become a permanent resident and you're living in Brazil, then the tax bracket is gonna depend on all the income that you have. So depending on the income, depending on other things, that's how the tax bracket is gonna be assessed. And the tax bracket goes to up to 27.5%. All right, Moses. So without, like taking a look at your specifics, but giving you like a couple of references, which may be correct or not, I would say if you're not living permanently in Brazil because you are in the first 4 years of your real estate investor visa, most probably than not, it would be a 15% tax bracket. Now, if you are indeed in the permanent stage of your journey as a real estate investor in Brazil, then you do need to have like your financials reviewed by a CPA. So the CPA is going to assess where you're going to follow in the range of tax brackets ranging from 0% to 27.5%. All right, Moses, I hope that was helpful. Simone Rodriguez, welcome Simone. Hello Luciana, I'd like to know if when digital nomad visa expires after 1 year, I would have a problem to enter with tourist visa or I have to wait for some time. Simone, that's a good question, right? That's a very good question because in theory, you've been in Brazil for a full year. Is not a visitor, a tourist stay. It's a digital nomad. If I had to guess, I would guess you could come as a tourist right away because again, they have different natures. The digital nomad has a different nature as the tourism, but I do not guarantee, okay? Like I don't know from the top of my head, to be honest with you, Simone. So I would take my guess with a grain of salt, okay? Because that type of information we don't actually have in the regulations, in the a framework that we can see for the Brazilian immigration. So that's more on an experience basis. And I don't recall if we ever had someone who would leave the digital nomad to come back right away as a tourist, right? I think a safer path would be, listen, if you got the digital nomad and you want to continue to be in Brazil, just renew your digital nomad. Okay, Simone? I hope that makes sense. Pelo Mundo is asking, if I have a tourist visa from the last administration with Lula, can I enter Brazil? It expires in 2026. Do I need to advise anyone before leaving? Pelo Mundo, yes, these are the typical, right? The typical visas, not the e-visa. This is like the traditional visa stamped on the passport. And guess what? They are still issued nowadays. So nowadays you have the traditional visa that is stamped on your passport, and you have the e-visa. So both visas, they coexist, and your visa is just good as the e-visa. All right, Pelo Mundo. Ken Hillard, my social security apostille is not from the U.S. government, but the District of Columbia, which is a special district where the government is located. Ken, so we do get apostilles all the time in Washington D.C., right? And I don't handle the filings myself, as you may imagine, but the way our team classifies the apostille is like from Washington D.C., right? So not D.C., but Washington D.C., right? That's what I hear all the time. And this comes from the State of Department for the United States. So that's not from the District of Columbia, I would guess. That's from the State Department of the United States of America, right? Now, if the one you're talking about from District of Columbia is the same thing that we're talking about, that would be good. Now, in my experience, again, Brazilian authorities, they are not really crazy about assessing where you got the apostille. We see that happening all the time, right? They get an apostille, they give you a thumbs up, and life goes on, all right? Ari, boa tarde, Luciana. I'm happy to be back in Brazil and now in my very own Brazilian home on the beach. Good for you, Ari. I'm not sure if that's the same Ari that I'm thinking about, right? We have a client named Ari, but I guess there are many Aris in the world. But if it is, so good to see you over here, Ari. Regarding the Brazilian visa by real estate, how long does the application process usually last? What documentation needs to be supplied aside from all the particulars of the real estate? In our experience, Ari, it does take us like between 2 to 3 months to get you an approval after we start working on your application, okay? And documentation, the main documentation to be supplied is usually the apostilled birth certificate. And if you bought a property with us, you have it already, right? The apostilled birth certificate. The second main requirement is going to be, if you are from the United States, an FBI background check with an apostille from Washington, D.C. Now, if you're from the UK, it's going to be something similar. It's going to be a background check from the United Kingdom, but not, of course, like verified by Washington, D.C., but in this case, verified, if I'm not mistaken, the term that they use is Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the United Kingdom. All right, so these are the two main documents. There is like actually a large list. You're also going to need, the currency exchange paperwork. That's usually a pain in the neck. You're going to need, the deed for the properties that you bought. But the two main ones that usually give people a harder time is going to be the apostilled birth certificate and the apostilled background check. All right, Ari. Bill, are there funeral homes and cemeteries in Rio and around Brazil? Yes, Bill, that's super common, particularly, it's very easy for you to see like in smaller towns because usually they are on Main Street. So let's say if you are in São Paulo and you're gonna drive to Serra Negra, right? Serra Negra is an amazing small town, about 2 hours and a half drive from São Paulo. And in between São Paulo and Serra Negra, you're gonna cross a bunch of small cities, right? And very common, like you're driving through the small city, and on the main road, you're gonna see the funeral homes. Same thing for the cemeteries. Sometimes it's not on the main street, but just because of the size of the city, you end up seeing like part of the cemetery, and that's an interesting question. So you can easily see that in small towns, but pretty much every single town in Brazil will have those things, Bill, funeral homes and cemeteries as well. Cemeteries in Brazil, usually people are gonna, buy just like they buy real estate in general. You're gonna pay a down payment, like a larger down payment, and you're gonna pay a monthly installment, sometimes for 10 years, and then you're gonna get like usually a set of 6 positions in a certain area of the cemetery, right? And those 6 positions, they are gonna be used by you and your family, right? And as those positions become like busy, usually Brazilians, right? Like they're gonna pick like the earliest deceased remains, and then they are gonna move. They are gonna move to like a kind of container to make those positions available for the newcomers, if you will. All right, that's very common. Like I clearly remember, right? Like those type of situations in my family, and I haven't dealt with that type of need yet. But eventually, just nature says that all of us will need to have something like that. So that's in my plans. Actually, that's an interesting reminder, Bill. That's something that all of us will need to consider, right? All right, Ari. Yes, the same, Ari. So good to see you over here, Ari. Yes, Ari is a client of ours. So good to see you over here, Ari. Ari, very excited about Brazil, right, Ari? Not gonna share the specifics, of course, I cannot share, but Ari is a very energized gentleman and very happy to visit Brazil, if you allow me to say that, right, Ari? Really nice to see you over here. Jackson Fox, with a tourist visa, can I get a CPF? Can I get a bank account? Jackson, you don't even need a tourist visa to get a CPF. You can just go. Let's assume, Jackson, that you are from the United States. You just go to a Brazilian consulate. They are going to be happy to give you a CPF. All right. Now, if you come to Brazil under a tourist visa, you may have a hard time actually to get a CPF. In theory, Brazilian postal services The Banco do Brasil or Bank of Brazil is another entity in charge of issuing CPFs, and the Brazilian Receita Federal or the Revenue Service of Brazil, these three entities in Brazil, they are actually supposed to issue CPFs, tax IDs for foreign citizens. Very often you're going to go there and it's going to happen the same thing that another colleague of ours was sharing, like he went to Polícia Federal and Polícia Federal said, well, I'm not going to help, right? So that's super common to happen in Brazil. And I remember, like many, many years ago, I would say, well, Banco do Brasil and Brazilian Postal Service, they do issue CPF. And every now and then someone would go there, they would be denied the CPF, and this person would get mad at me and say, well, you said I was going to get. So nowadays, I'm very careful. I just say, listen, they have this institutional role of issuing the CPF, but very rarely they're going to do so. And it may sound surprising to you, right? How can you say that? Like, I mean, if they have this role, it goes like this. It goes like this, Jackson. Like, I mean, you create this role for this entity to issue the CPFs, but nobody over there speaks any level of English, right? So you show up like, talking in English, and there is no communication whatsoever, right? So without communication, that person sitting, in front of you, they're not going to be able to do their job, right? So it is what it is, right? Like, I mean, or let me put it in a different way. Like maybe if you go to five different Bancos do Brasil or five different, postal offices in Brazil, you're going to get the CPF, right? So that's another perspective. But because of this uncertainty, usually we're going to tell, people to just go to their, to the nearest Brazilian consulate, and they are going to be happy to issue you one. All right, Jackson. Bank account, not at all, right? Tourist visa, it does not qualify for a bank account. What you can get is the non-resident bank account. And by the way, we do assist many of our clients to get a non-resident bank account. You don't need to be a tourist. You don't need to even be in Brazil. Let's say you never came to Brazil at all, right? You can get a non-resident bank account, but not a traditional one. All right, Jackson. Okay, so it's about time for us to end our live stream today. We're not gonna have a live stream on Wednesday, but we're gonna have a live stream on next Sunday. All right, so just hang tight. Next Sunday we are back, and then just keep a log of the points of interest for you. Keep coming. That I'm sure we're gonna address them timely. All right. So taking here our last point of the day, Aaron, if someone was to invest in a business for the Golden Visa, which types of industry do you think it would be good for this, in your opinion? You can invest in existing business, correct? Aaron, yes, you can invest both in existing business and new businesses alike, right? And I don't have any suggestion, Aaron, right? I mean, I'm sorry, but I just have this kind of concern about being understood as saying, yes, go, follow their route, right? Like, I mean, I saw people having trouble in all types of industries, right? Even in real estate. In real estate, you would assume, like, I mean, there is not too much for you to screw up, right? You buy real estate, you do short-term rentals. I mean, it couldn't be much more straightforward than that. But I see all the time people are going to invest in a business. There is a Brazilian partner. Brazilian partner says they're going to do something. They do something else. The U.S. party wants to sue the Brazilian. It becomes a madhouse. We don't want to touch that, Aaron. Trust me, we don't want to touch that. So unfortunately, I'm going to need to skip on that answer, Aaron, but I hope you understand why. Let me check. Ken Hillard, I also have income from veterans, disability from my time in the military. Does my VA benefits letter need to be apostilled? Can I use an apostille from my U.S. state? Ken, first thing, that's just perfect, right? VA disability is a major source of income for our retirement applications. We are a very traditional source of service for veterans in the United States. Not long ago, I was sharing, and nowadays it's already a fact. Our, youngest retiree in Brazil is a veteran in his 20s, right? So, pretty consistent, pretty well respected everywhere, not only the United States but in Brazil. Disability, like big time traditional retirement type of income. You good, all right? You good. Now, in regards to the apostille, we did both in the past. We did get an apostille from the state and Washington D.C. Both of them worked just fine, all right? So that's our experience, Ken. I hope it was helpful. I want to say thank you to all of you who participated in our live stream. Like I said, your participation is what makes this live stream great. So thank you for coming. I wish you guys a blessed rest of your Sunday and see you